Hey, this is Caitlin. Welcome back to my channel. So today I'm showing you how we created the pumpkin head look from start to finish. So actually, what I wasn't able to record was getting the bags tied up. Essentially, to make the pumpkin heads, you're going to do a paper mache project. And to start paper macheing over it, as we are now, you need to have something to paper mache over. So what works for the pumpkin shape would be a large plastic bag stuffed with pillowcase stuffing and tied off with 4 strings really, really tight to produce those pumpkin-like bumps all tied together. And at the bottom, where it's all tied, is where we actually leave a bit of space because of the where we're going to put our heads in. So we're going to end up cutting it out to be a perfect circle, but we essentially paper mache all over that plastic bag up until that point. So that's what we're doing here. And we didn't have any actual newspaper, so we got packaging paper, which is also fine to use. And you can also, I think Greg did a Passover with some paper towel, and that's also fine. As far as what Google says, it's perfect for replacement when you don't have the newspaper. And I ended up remaking the plastic bag portion so many times because it just was never tight enough. So definitely get some string that you can pull really taut for this. As well as I did attempt a couple of times to start it with plastic bags also inside the big plastic bag for the stuffing, and that just was not doing it. It was too pokey and not smooth enough, if that makes any sense. So I highly recommend just using stuffing, which might have been the most expensive thing I got from Michael's. We got like 4 or 5 bags of stuffing because the more stuffed the better, and then just return the bags you don't use, truly. But yeah, so that was the paper mache portion. All right, move around. This is gonna be awesome. Almost forgot the stems, but it's okay to go back, use a little aluminum foil, and make a stem and paper mache it onto the head after you paper mache everything else. That's fine, but don't forget the stem. So next is the paste. This is in the instructions, and there is one thing I regret following: the toilet paper portion of the ingredients list. We did follow it, and it ended up making everything really hard, and they were all just, I don't know if blending it might be the better choice, but you'll see if you look closely that there's little bits of toilet paper that just make everything look bumpy. Now, a little bit of bumpiness on a pumpkin, I think that makes it look pretty textured and pretty cool, but I was rather hoping it would be not in that way. It says to dry the chunks of toilet paper, and we tried to do it the best we can, but it does not match the lady's video either, so maybe we made some sort of mistake. But I think maybe blending up the toilet paper in that ingredients list might work out better for you. I truly, carrying the pumpkin later on, almost cut my freaking thumb because it was so spiky and hard. So yes, be cautious of the toilet paper step. And yeah, I guess you could just paint the paper mache itself, but doing this paste allows for a really fine paint finish on a good, like, minus the bumpiness, made the painting a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. If the bumpiness wasn't there, it would have been the easiest thing to paint ever. Whereas trying to paint over paper like newspaper or this packaging paper, it just doesn't work. Trust me, I have tried painting that kind of material before, and it just takes so much effort and so much paint, and it always just sinks through and it's never opaque. So I really recommend doing this part of the step. Thanks again to Madnator on Instagram, where I found her reel and I fell in love with the style. Shout out to you for making this happen. Thanks so much. This process took about 3 weeks. Of course, we had to find the time in our schedules to actually sit down and do this together. But each process, so the paper mache needed to dry before we could go to the paste step, and then the paste step needed to dry before we could now paint. So that also took at least a few days in between. I will also recommend we just left the pumpkin head sitting on the towel here, and we had like a fan on them occasionally. But I did see one other lady's video where she laid her pumpkins to dry sitting on top of like a plastic cup or on some propped up surface. That may have helped us as well, because the bottom of the pumpkin always kind of stayed a little bit dry. Now, luckily, that was the portion in which we were cutting out for our head, but it could have been a disaster if more of the bottom of the pumpkin had been too wet. We wouldn't have been able to cut a hole appropriately, or it might have ripped. So just make sure the bottom of your pumpkin is also drying. So in between the paste drying and painting, we did cut out the eye shapes, or the eye pupils, or Greg's eye shape, and then we just painted on the mouths, and we did end up putting felt behind, see-through felt behind the eyes so that you couldn't see our eyes in the picture, which I thought was really nice. And I believe at that point we also cut out the bottom where our heads went in and pulled out all the pumpkin gut stuffing at that same time. Now we're painting. So what I recommend for painting is, if you're doing 2 at once as well, buy extra paint and just return the paint that you don't end up needing or using, because we this very night, had to make an emergency Michaels run because we ran out of the orange paint. Thank you, Greg, for taking me to Michaels, because I was like, bro, we need to finish this. It needs to dry, because then the paint needs to dry so we can go take cute pictures in the weekend, right? So that was a nightmare, but it was okay. So one thing is for sure, I don't know if there's a method to paper mache that I'm not aware of. The video that we're following looks so great, but at this point I felt a little defeated, because the pumpkin shapes, the wedges of the pumpkin, were not that apparent at this point. So that was a little disappointing. But with the magic of paint, we were able to highlight and shade different areas of the pumpkin to show the depth and the wedges, those pumpkin wedges. We were able to finish the pumpkins. I think we did 2 different painting days, one for the overall color and then one for the more fine details. And yeah, it took us 3 weeks to finish. This is a fun fall project. I do recommend it. Take the tips that I've given you and definitely try it out. Here's the final results.